Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Respected ulama, my elders, brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum. So tonight is the 5th of Safar 1443 after Hijri. When I say the 5th, it's the eve of the 5th. Tomorrow was the 5th, today was the 4th. We're gathered here today for the second Majalis on this, the first weekend of the month of Safar. The agenda for tonight's program will be as follows. We will have recitation of Salam and Marsiya by Brother Jafar Abbas. This will be followed by Majalis recited by Hujjat al-Islam, Maulana Shaykh Reza Hemyari, and we'll have Matam after the Majalis with Noha recited by Brother Jafar Abbas. Before moving forward with the program, as usual, the brief community announcements. Weekly Majlises will continue on Thursday nights. The next Majlis will be on Thursday, September 16th. The program will start with Salatul Maghribain, which will be at 7:20 p.m. After Salah, there will be a recitation of Dua Kumail. This will be followed by a Majlis addressed by Hujjatul Islam, Maulana Shaykh Amir Mukhtar Faizi. Ladies Majlis takes place every Saturday morning at 10:30 a.m. The Majlises are being addressed by Sister Maryam Ali Tahir. These Saturday morning Majlises will continue until October 9th, inshallah. For the weekend preceding Arba'een, that's the weekend of the 25th and 26th, there will be a guest speaker for the Ladies Majlis. The Majlis will be addressed by Sayyidah Isra Safiuddin. The topic will be Imam Mehdi's occultation and its implications. On Sunday, September 26th, there will be a girls' youth session that will be led by Sayyidah Isra Safiuddin. The topic will be Islamic ethics and social media. There is no registration for these sessions. For further details, please contact Sister Myra Zaidi or Sister Nida Abbas. So, the Arba'een Majlis. The Majalis will start in the evening after Maghrib on Friday, September 24th, and will be nightly until Tuesday, the 28th of September. The programs will begin at 7:30 p.m. with Salatul Maghribain, and there will be a day Majlis on the day of Arba'een. That's going to be Tuesday, September 28th. The Majlis will begin with Salatul Zahrain at 1 p.m. All the Majalis will be addressed by Sayyid Rizwan Rizvi of New Jersey. The sponsors of tonight's Majlis request that we remember their marhumeen, as well as to remember all the marhumeen who are present in today's program with a Surah Fatiha preceded by a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillah. Let us begin the program. Please welcome Brother Jafar Abbas to the platform with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala.
Salli ala Muhammad. Baradigan Nare Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa ajil faradi. शबीर को खालिक ने सकीना जो अता की, ज़ैनब किसी सूरत थी, सब उस माहिलका की, जिस दम दिया गोदी में उसे लाके کے چچا کی عباس نے ہاتھوں کو اٹھا کر یہ دعا کی رکھے تجھے اے لاڈلی اللہ سلامت دنیا میں رہے سر پترے شاہ سلامت شبیر کو خالق نے صلوات برحمت اللہ بابا مجھے زندہ کے اندھیرے سے بچا لو بابا مجھے زندہ کے اندھیرے سے بچا لو تنہائی سے وحشت سے مجھے آ کے نکالو بابا مجھے زندہ کے اندھیرے سے بچا لو ہاری ہوئی تقدیر ہے اب ساتھ میں میرے کرتے کی جلی راکھ ہے اب ہاتھ میں میرے تقدیر کی ماری کو گلے آ کے لگا لو بابا مجھے زندہ کے اندھیرے سے بچا لو گالوں پہ تماچوں کے نشاں آ کے تو دیکھو یہ تیری جدائی میں سزا ملتی ہے مجھ کو مر جاؤں گی رو رو کے مجھے آ کے سنبھالو بابا مجھے زندہ کے اندھیرے سے بچا لو کربل سے تجھے شام تلک دی ہیں صدائیں افسوس مگر تو نے سنی نہ میری آہیں آغوش میں اب اپنی مجھے آ کے سلا لو تنہائی سے وحشت سے مجھے آ کے بچا لو بابا نہ روشنی کوئی نہ تازہ ہوا ہے سینے میں میرا سانس بھی اب رکنے لگا ہے اس گھور اندھیرے سے مجھے آ کے نکالو بابا مجھے زندہ کے اندھیرے سے بچا لو زندان کے اندھیرے میں مجھے نیند میرے چاروں طرف موت کے سائے، بس ایک دفعہ اپنے سینے پہ سلا لو۔ بابا مجھے زندہ کے اندھیرے سے بچا لو۔ احساس یتیمی کے سائے میں رہی ہوں، بابا تیرے قاتل کے میں ساتھ چلی ہوں۔ غربت پہ میری آ کے ذرا آنسو بہا لو، تنہائی سے وحشت سے مجھے آ کے بچا لو۔ بابا مجھے زندہ کے اندھیرے سے بچا لو۔ صلوات بر محمد و آل محمد۔ اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد بارہ دیگر نعرہ صلوات۔ اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد۔ سکینہ شام کے زندان میں تھی علم سے نڈھال، کبھی چچا کا تصور، کبھی پدر کا خیال، کبھی رباب سے باتیں، کبھی پھوپھی سے مقا، کبھی خاموش، کبھی عابد حزین سے سوا، کبھی خاموش، کبھی عابد حزین سے سوا۔ چچا کب آئیں گے دریا سے لوٹ کر بھیا، یہاں سے نہر کا ہے کس قدر سفر بھائی، یہاں سے نہر کا ہے کس قدر سفر بھائی۔ میں کربلا میں رہی منتظر نہیں، لین لے گئے میرے گوہر نہیں، جلا دیے گئے ہم سب کے گھر نہیں، صدائیں دیتی رہی میں مگر نہیں، صدائیں دیتی رہی میں مگر نہیں۔ ہوائیں سرد ترائی میں جب ملی ہوں، تھکے ہوئے تھے بہت نیند آ گئی ہو، تھکے ہوئے تھے بہت نیند آ گئی ہو، تڑپتی رہتی تھی معصوم یوں ہی شام، تسلیاں اسے دیتے تھے عابد رباب، روتی تھیں بچی کی بھولی باتوں، نگاہ یاس سے تکتی تھی زینب بے، نگاہ یاس سے تکتی تھی زینب، پیام مرگ بنی دل کی بے کلی، چچا کے پاس भतीजी चली गई आप चाचा के पास, भतीजी चली गई। ये ज़ख्म ताज़ा जो अहले हरम के दिल पलक तो कैद खाने में एक हश्र हो गया। बर तड़प के जानिबे आबिद रबाब ने दे, बस इतना कह सकी है ये क्या हुआ। बस इतना कह सके है ये क्या हुआ। भाई ना दिन को तड़पेगी अब ना शब को रोएगी, जिना में बाप के सीने से लग के सोए, जिना में बाप के सीने से लग के सोएगी सकीना शाम के। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला सलामत रखिए, अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मद।
For Brother Jafar Abbas' Sehat and Salamati, please recite aloud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. The father-in-law of Brother Mushtaba Akbari just passed away in Australia. His name was Sayyid Muhammad Sardar Haider. For his soul, please recite aloud salawat followed by Surah Fatiha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillah. Before I invite Hujjatul Islam Shaykh Reza Hemyari to the minbar, on behalf of the Baitul Ilm community, I would like to thank Shaykh Hemyari for taking time out of his busy schedule to enlighten the community with this weekend's Majalis. For him and his family's continued health and safety, please recite aloud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. With that, please welcome Shaykh Hemyari to the minbar with another loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Al-Fatiha. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وبه نستعين إنه خير ناصر ومعين. ثم الصلاة والسلام التحية والإكرام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين
واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى يوم الدين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وعلى 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين، سيما بقية الله في الأرضين وحجته على الخلق أجمعين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس من قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات. Dear brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yesterday we began this conversation on the role that religion plays in giving meaning to our lives and allowing us to make decisions about what types of actions we will do and what types of actions we will refrain from, and the role that religion plays in defining for us what is good, what is evil, what is virtuous, and what is vicious. And began yesterday with this story, this historical anecdote about after the events of Karbala, the army of Yazid turned their attention towards the other cities of the Muslims, towards Medina and Mecca. And so within just a matter of a few months or a few years, these other cities were ransacked and they were besieged, and many more Muslims were killed, as one of the signs of what is the potential for destruction and evil that human beings can create in the world. When those priorities and those values are upended, when they forget about not only their religion, but their souls themselves and the origin of their souls, what is the potential evil that human beings can create in the world? And so we see that not only were the Muslims, these Muslims who were so indebted to the Prophet, not only were they willing to kill and slaughter the grandson of the Prophet of Islam, Imam Hussein, in the plains of Karbala, but they went in each and every one of the sanctuaries that the Muslims were trying to take refuge in, they also destroyed those and killed more Muslims. It's one of the signs of how evil human beings can potentially become. But yet there's always a different side. Allah has created His creation with both a negative potential and a positive one. In fact, when the Muslims, these supposed Muslims, these people, the army of Yazid, go and attack the city of Medina, it is said that, it is reported that it was the house of Imam Zainul Abidin, Sayyidul Sajidin, that was set up as a sanctuary that no one would be willing to violate. In fact, when we look in history, the Banu Umayyah, the line of Abu Sufyan, which Muawiyah was born into, and then Yazid as a son of Muawiyah, this line ends after just a few years. And then the Banu Umayyah changes to a different lineage, that of Marwan. But what the instruction was, once this army of Yazid comes to Medina, was that, because these were after the events of Karbala, and Yazid and his army realized the power that Imam Hussein had, not militaristically, not in terms of arms or even in terms of individual soldiers, but the power of that virtue and that righteousness, that piety that Imam Hussein symbolized. Symbol of Islam itself. Once you go against that symbol, then there is hell to bear. And so the order was that the house of Imam Zainul Abidin, the Ahl al-Bayt, is not to be touched. You can do whatever other evil you would want, kill whatever other people you want, but the house of Imam Zainul Abidin is not to be touched. And so this house became the sanctuary for those most innocent in society. The women and the children of Medina took refuge in the house of Imam Sajjad. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala. We have one potential for evil and then the opposite potential for the ultimate good. Yesterday we also began talking about how Islam in particular and religion more generally tries to uncover for us that ultimate meaning that we can give to our lives and the way we can arrange and orient ourselves and our actions. We said that Islam in particular does this by revealing to us who we truly are, our souls, the origin and the source of who we are and our very being and our very existence. So we talked about that if a person wants to truly understand themselves, they must first and foremost understand where their being comes from. What is the source of their very existence? So Islam and religion uncovers for us the very creation and the very reality of God's creation. One of the effects of religion then, one of the effects of Islam is to open our eyes and to allow us to discover the creation of Allah, to make us eager to uncover all of the realities of the outer world, of the outer creation of Allah, and as well the inner. So we try to discover what type of being we are. What are the different dimensions of our soul? What is that potential for good that our soul has within it? And in fact, this is that famous ayah of the Quran, Surah Al-Rum, which Allah tells us that religion is the way for you to understand and for you to connect back to that very nature upon which you were created. فَأَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا لَا تَبْدِيلَ لِخَلْقِ اللَّهِ. This famous ayah that many of us may be familiar with, it's telling us that religion is mixed with the very source and the very nature of our being. If we want to uncover that nature, if we want to discover who we are, we have to look back at religion. فَأَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا. Turn your face and orient yourself and set within your heart the religion of God as a people of true faith. Hanifa. فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا. This creation that Allah, this nature that Allah has created you upon, that is the deen of Allah. ذَلِكَ الدِّينُ الْقَيِّمُ. That is the religion of Allah. If you want to understand what the role and the function of religion is, the role and the function of religion is to uncover your very nature, uncover those different aspects and different dimensions of your soul. And so when we look at how religion does this, we see that one of the first ways that religion uncovers our soul is by discovering for us and by showing to us all of those most beautiful characteristics that we can instill within ourselves. Our soul, ultimately, is a thing that is attracted towards beauty. Each and every one of us, whenever we see something, a beautiful object, for example, we're automatically attracted to it, whether it's a rose, a scene, or whatever it might be. Automatically, our soul almost yearns for that thing, and we might even want it for ourselves. We have this attraction, this strange, and it might not even be rational. We couldn't even sometimes explain what it is, but we're attracted towards beauty. And you can think about all of the different experiences that you have with this. Now, virtue and goodness is the soul trying to create this beauty within itself. On the one hand, we have scenes and maybe objects in the world that are beautiful and we are attracted towards. Virtue is then the ability of the soul to will itself, to create that beauty within itself. A soul that yearns for beauty, it then yearns to create that beauty within itself through its will. It tries to orient itself towards beauty, and not just outer beauty, but inner beauty. And we see that one of the ultimate and primary missions of the Prophet is to create this virtue and this beauty within the souls in each and every Muslim. So we have all of these proclamations of the Prophet, of the Quran, and of the different Ahlul Bayt, that the ultimate aim that we have is to create within us these makarimul akhlaq, these most noble and beautiful characteristics, these most noble virtues. So one of the aims of religion then, one of the aims of Islam in particular, the religion of God, is to uncover for us and allow us to create that beauty within our soul. And then as well for us to be able to spread that beauty within our, say, families, our communities, and then society. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. This is one dimension. One dimension of the soul is this receptivity, this reflection of outer beauty within itself, and then this ability to will and to want to create beauty within itself, so that then it can exude that beauty to others. Another dimension of the soul that Islam tells us about is the aql, that guides us and directs us towards what is actually beautiful and what is good and what is evil and ugly. The aql, the intellect. And in particular, Islam points us towards the aql as one of the highest gifts and blessings that Allah has given to mankind. And so we have various different ahadith. One hadith in particular where our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam, he says that the aql is that proof, that evidence that human beings can bring in the face and in the court of Allah to prove that this action that they have done is good and this action that they have refrained from is bad. Al-hujjatu fima bayna al-ibadi wa bayna Allah al-aql. This aql is a proof that we can bring. If our aql tells us that something is good, something is virtuous, and if if our aql tells us, this is definitely something that you should do, and we go and commit it, then we have sufficient evidence in the day of judgment. If we are faced with Allah, we come face to face in the court of Allah, and it ends up that our aql was mistaken, then we have some proof, we have some evidence to bring to that court. We tell Allah, my aql, it was maybe deficient, but it told me that this was good, and so I did it. And I did not have any other source to tell me that this was evil. We talk about Islam as giving particular importance to aql, as being that force, that ability of our souls to discern between good and evil. Now, within the school of the Ahlul Bayt, the aql is given even more importance. Many of the other schools, of course, this is a teaching of the Quran itself, where the Quran talks about ta'aqqul, tafakkur, and so on. But in particular, in the school of the Ahlul Bayt, we have various teachings of the Ahlul Bayt where they tell us and they point us towards that aql. And in fact, in the fiqh of school of the Ahlul Bayt, we have this maxim, this proverb, this very basic rule and law. Ma hakama bihi al-aql, hakama bihi al-shar. We talk about a general sense of virtue, general sense of what is good and what is evil. But then very specifically in our fiqh, we have this proverb that tells us whatever the aql has discerned and has judged as being good and does something good to me, then I must thank them. Shukrul mun'im wajib. It's a very basic proverb that many different people, it's a very common thing that is said, it's a very common phrase. Shukrul mun'im wajib. Giving thanks. I receive a gift, for example. Somebody gives me a gift. I should thank them. It's a very basic idea. If instead somebody gives me a gift and I say, this, thank you, I don't even say maybe thank you. I say, do you have the gift receipt? I was actually looking for something else. Or maybe I'll say, where can I put this? This is not really something that I need or I want. Where's the nearest trash bin for me to throw this away? For a person who does something like this, who responds to a gift, to a blessing in this way, then our immediate response will be, well, I'm never going to do this again. Never going to give this person a gift ever again. And so our intellects tell us that there is this very basic rule that we have. If you receive some good, somebody does some good to you, then you have to thank them. You have to show some gratitude. Now, later on, you might go and return the gift or whatever, but at that very basic level, you have to show some gratitude. And this is something that our intellects tell us. It doesn't really require much thought or reflection. So on one level, our intellects can discern for us what is good and what is bad. And then our religion comes and tells us that we must abide and follow that discernment. So for those who might think that religion is ultimately against reasoning and against the intellect and goes against the intellect, well, particularly for Islam, this isn't true. And in particular for the school of the Ahlul Bayt, it is given the aql, and our reasoning and our intellect is given pride of place. But then when we think about it, there are certain things that it's clear. For example, the very basic ideas. Giving thanks is a good thing. Being compassionate, being merciful is a good thing. Being, for example, brave in the face of difficulty, courageous, is a good thing. Being unjust is a bad thing. There are these very basic ideas that we have, very basic maybe sentences or propositions that our intellect can tell us. But at the same time, our intellect also tells us that these very basic ideas are just that. They're very limited and they're very basic. We can't just live our life based on these short sentences, these small propositions. Being courageous is good. All right, well, but then how do I actually live my life? Most of us don't really know whether one situation requires courage or one situation requires something else. Right? And so we see that sometimes our intellect just doesn't have the ability to discern whether something is good or evil. It just can't tell us what we should do in one situation versus another. This is on the one hand. On another hand, sometimes we see that our intellect tells us one thing, our mind tells us one thing, and then we see someone else, his mind tells him something else. He reasons towards something totally different. Our intellects, in the end of the day, are part of our soul. And our soul is not just defined by reason and intellect, but it's defined by other things as well. By all the desires that we have, all of the whims and the thoughts that we have. So sometimes we can actually reason towards something that is actually in the end of the day, it's evil. And so by our very intellect, we can understand that our intellect is limited. And our intellect can't be the only source by which we give meaning to our lives. Our own intellect tells us that we need something else. We need something higher and greater. And this is where religion comes in. Religion defines for us not just what is good and what is bad, not specific acts, but it defines for us what it means to live a meaningful life. And it also defines for us what type of perspective we should have in leading this meaningful life. Again, when we look at the words of the Ahlul Bayt, we see that the Ahlul Bayt talk about religion as a way for uncovering not only our soul, but the intellect that God has given us. In one of the first khutbah of Nahj al-Balagha, Amirul Mu'mineen, Imam al-Muttaqeen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salam, he describes for us the mission of the prophets. Allah sent down the prophets to humankind to fulfill certain missions. And one of the missions of the prophets is for them to uncover those hidden treasures within our intellect. وَيُثِيرُونَ لَهُمْ دَفَائِنَ الْعُقُولِ. There are certain things that are covered by our whims and our desires, those things that we want and that may divert our intellect from its proper function. And the function and the mission of the prophets and the Ahlul Bayt is to come and uncover these hidden treasures of our intellects. So when we think about the function of religion, not only does it tell us that you must follow your intellect, but then it comes and it allows our intellect to thrive with just a few individual or a few certain changes of our orientation. And this, maybe we can relate to this. A lot of times we might think that something is good, but then when we reflect on it a little bit more, we realize that this process and this procedure that we've undertaken is actually entirely harmful. We can maybe appreciate this in our day and age in particular. So for example, you might hear one day that, especially in this day and age, that this vaccine, you should stay away from it. This is harmful for you and so on and so forth. And then we do a little bit more research and we speak to certain specialists, and then all of a sudden they bring us other arguments and other reasons for why, no, actually this vaccine is better for you and it's more effective. Or these protocols, for example, we might hear an argument and it might make complete sense to us that these safety protocols are irrelevant and they're not really effective. And then we hear another argument from a specialist or from someone else, we do a little bit more research ourselves, and then we realize, no, these are actually very effective and these will prevent us from being ill. So just by reflecting a little bit, we're able to discover and uncover some things that our intellects tells us is good. One of these things is the perspective that Islam gives about the direction and the orientation of our lives. Islam tells us that if you think about your life, if the perspective that you take towards your life is that you are born into this world and then you die, and your existence is simply limited to this earthly and physical body, and once you are born, your existence comes and becomes true, and then once you die, that existence ends, then our lives will become totally meaningless. A person who thinks that their entire being and their entire reality is limited to just a few days or a few months or a few years, whether it's 80 or 90 years, this person, they think that their entire being and their entire existence and their entire life is limited to this time. It's very difficult for that person to find meaning. I came, for example, from an accident, came from certain luck. That's how I came into this world. And then just with that same amount of luck, I will leave this world and I will become nothing. If a person has this perspective, then it's very difficult for them to have any sort of meaning in their lives, in their actions, and whatever else they might do. But then Islam comes and tells us that this is entirely wrong perspective to have about your own existence. When we look in, for example, the teachings of Amir al-Mu'mineen in Nahj al-Balagha, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Amir al-Mu'mineen tells us that the perspective that we must have about our lives, what the term that is used is zuhd. A lot of times we translate this as asceticism, as trying to stay away from the world. What Amir al-Mu'mineen tells us is that zuhd, in fact, is not just about staying away from the pleasures of this world, but it's about thinking about your life in terms of that ultimate goal and that ultimate end that your life has. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And setting up your life, creating this perspective for yourself that you are going to live your life to reach that goal. My entire life is going to be dedicated to that ultimate end. I come from Allah, that source of my existence, and I am going to go back to Him. And so I live my life with that in mind. If there are certain worldly pleasures that take me away from that goal, then I will abstain from them. I will stay away from them. But if there are certain worldly pleasures, say creating a family, having love towards my children, having love towards my parents, having a good job, a good career, donating, and so on and so forth, all of these things, if those actions that I have allow me to get closer to that ultimate goal that I have, then that's a good thing. That's actually not zuhd anymore if you stay away from those things. It's actually ignorance. And so Islam gives us then the appropriate perspective. It redirects our aims and the meaning that our life has towards that ultimate meaning, towards our ultimate end. Now for there are those amongst us who enjoy poetry and literature. Islam, one of the beauties of Islam is that not just within the words of the Ahlul Bayt and the Prophet, but as well within all of Islamic civilization, we have people who have come and made these teachings in the most beautiful ways, and who have written these teachings in poetry, in literature, and so on. So when we think about this change of perspective, there's this famous verse of poetry from the Persian poet, where he says, Man malak budam, I was an angel. Wa firdaus barin jayam bud. Apologize to those who don't understand Farsi, but tried to translate it. It's always difficult to translate poetry. He says, I was an angel and the highest heavens was my abode and my residence. Adam آورد در این دیر خراب آبادم. It was Adam that brought me into this desolate and really ruined abode. It was he who brought me into this world. My ultimate goal, my place, my true abode is the heavens. And so I shouldn't suffice myself. I shouldn't satisfy myself with anything less. This is, on the one hand, what Islam gives us in terms of a perspective, that if we just take a little bit of reflection and we think about it, it makes sense to us. But then on the other hand, there are certain things that, however much we might try, we can't understand. Unless Allah gives us the reasoning behind these things, we just wouldn't understand them. Our aql just can't reach it. One of these examples is in terms of the laws that Allah has created, the laws that Allah has revealed to His Prophet. That our aql, however much we might try, we just simply can't understand what is the reasoning behind these laws. And so we have in various ahadith, and in particular in the Quran itself, that Allah says one of the missions of the prophets is to come and uncover these realities that you have within your soul, but also teach you things that you would not have known. Teach you things that you would have never known unless some revelation came to you. وَيُعَلِّمُونَكُمْ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And they come and they teach you things that you would not have had any access to. One example of this are the laws that we have, the Sharia and the fiqh. If Allah didn't tell us that this is how you are supposed to worship me, this is how you're supposed to show true piety, then we would not have been able to do it. And so one example of this, of Allah teaching us these requirements and these obligations that we have, and then He comes and gives us the reasoning behind them so that we can understand, is our salat. So if we think about what is the function that religion plays in our ability to create these virtues within ourselves, one of the ways that religion does this is by giving us these obligations: salat, zakat, sawm. In fact, in Nahj al-Balagha, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, he tells us the wisdom behind Allah's legislating salat. He says that one of the reasons Allah legislated salat is so that we can stay away from arrogance and vanity. We can go and prostrate ourselves on the ground, can bring ourselves to the lowest possible points that we have, place our heads on the earth, and remember the source of our being. Remember the source of our existence and how much indebted to that source we are, how much we depend on that source. وَعَنْ ذَلِكَ مَا حَرَصَ اللَّهُ عِبَادَهُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ بِالصَّلَوَاتِ وَالزَّكَوَاتِ وَمُجَاهَدَةِ الصِّيَامِ. And it is from that arrogance, from that vanity, that Allah protected His true servants, His believing and faithful servants, by legislating for them these prayers, by legislating for them this charity, that whatever wealth I have, this wealth is not something that I own, or this wealth is not something that I deserve. It is something that comes from somewhere else, from someone else. And so when I give this wealth then in zakat, when I give this wealth in charity, I am realizing the very basic reality of my existence, my need in that someone or something else. وَمُجَاهَدَةِ الصِّيَامِ. And I bring hunger to myself. I struggle in this hunger so that I can realize my ultimate dependence on that source. So another one of the functions, one of the ways that religion describes to us virtues is by creating these laws, some of which we may understand if Allah reveals to us the wisdom behind them, and some of which we don't. And it's through that very ignorance that Allah tells us and actually shows us and tries to destroy this arrogance within us. If we didn't have Islam, if we didn't have this perspective of religion and a source that we come from, then we wouldn't be able to avoid this arrogance that is a part of our very nature. This arrogance that each and every one of us might suffer from. We wouldn't really be able to, look at our own actions and then not take pride in those actions. Unless we understand that every single aspect of our creation, of our being, comes from somewhere else. And so we have these different levels. But ultimately, at the end of the day, however much we might try, we have these virtues that we can understand, and then we have our actions. We try to inculcate those virtues within our soul. But however much we might try, we're always going to fail because of our own negligence. And so Allah gives us certain individuals who have taken that path. We said that zuhd and that perspective that Islam gives us is in terms of a path back to our origin and our source. And so there are certain individuals who have taken that path of virtue, of piety, of taqwa. And we look at their lives and we see how did they organize and balance between one virtue or another. Again, I said earlier that whenever we are faced with a situation, a lot of times we don't know, does this situation require charity and compassion, or does it require something else? Does it require harshness? When we're, for example, dealing with our kids. Our kids are maybe sometimes act up, not your kids, I'll speak about my own. Sometimes they act up, and I don't know, should I show them compassion? Should I be merciful? Should I forgive and forget? Or should I be harsh? Should I tell them and discipline them? So I don't quite know, what does this require? And so I look in those people who have fulfilled and who have reached that ultimate potential that Allah has given them. Those people who have been defined by virtue and define themselves by that goodness and their relationship with Allah. And then I try to emulate their lives. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala. Said yesterday that this verse of the Quran of Surah Al-Baqarah, وَأْتُوا الْبُيُوتَ مِنْ أَبْوَابِهَا. Enter the houses according to the doors, those front entrances that you all yourselves understand and that is common and customary amongst you. We said that the primary bab of ilm that we have is, of course, Amir al-Mu'mineen, according to the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad al-Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ana madinatul ilm wa aliyun babuha. I am the city of knowledge and Ali is its gate. If you want to enter that city of knowledge, if you want to uncover the reality of what it means to be truly good, then look at this gate and enter through this gate. When we think about, sometimes when we try to think about, and maybe the misconception that we have about the actions and the interactions that Amir al-Mu'mineen had during his time and during his Khilafat, sometimes we think about Amir al-Mu'mineen as this unwavering person, this principled person who had certain principles, had certain values, and he never swayed from them, whatever circumstances they might have been. And it's true, Amir al-Mu'mineen had certain principles that he stood by for his entire life. But in his interactions, we see that not only did Amir al-Mu'mineen weigh different principles, and he chose certain principles over others. And so we see that in Nahj al-Balagha, again, there's a very profound statement that Amir al-Mu'mineen gives, and a testament that he gives to those who come after him, where he says, وَلَا تُقَاتِلُ الْخَوَارِجِ. We think of Amir al-Mu'mineen as this person who goes into battle and he, na'udhu billah, kills every one of those opponents, which with almost like some blinds that have been placed. No, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he understood the situation in its depth. He says, وَلَا تُقَاتِلُ الْخَوَارِجِ بَعْدِي. These Khawarij who ultimately come and assassinate the Imam, he says, don't go and fight these Khawarij after I have gone. Because a person who seeks man talab al-haq fa-akhta'ahu, a person who seeks the truth but isn't able to decipher what that truth is and where that truth is not like a person who seeks evil and finds that evil and is able to discern that evil. He says, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I make this distinction. I understand that the Khawarij, for all of their problems, they're ultimately trying to understand what it is that God requires of them. For all of their ignorance, for all of their arrogance, that this is their ultimate mission. But then there are others like Muawiyah who they seek evil, and that's their ultimate goal. And they find it, and they're successful. So I make this distinction then. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I make this distinction between those who find and seek the truth and maybe don't find it, and those who seek evil and find it. So we make this distinction, and we see that Amir al-Mu'mineen's life is based on this principle of weighing the different principles that Islam has set. It's not just a one direction that he has taken. And we have to be attuned to the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen so that we can understand not only the virtues that Amir al-Mu'mineen upheld, but how he upheld those virtues. So Allah, one of the blessings that Allah has given to us is by giving us these examples, these lives of people who we can try to emulate them. Sometimes we think about stories of the Ahlul Bayt as simply maybe a pastime that we have. But in fact, the stories of the Ahlul Bayt explain to us how then we can live ourselves. Sallu ala Muhammad. But then, again, we try to understand and we try to learn from the stories of the Ahlul Bayt. We try to understand and learn from the values and the virtues that God has revealed to us in His religion. But yet, in the end of the day, our actions are meager, and that potential that we have tried to fulfill and tried to actualize is lost. And it's interesting, in this ayah of the Quran that I began with, Allah says in Surah Al-Hashr, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, ittaqullah, wal tandur nafsum ma qaddamat lighad. O you who believe, have piety, have consciousness of Allah and fear Allah, and let each soul look at and consider and contemplate and reflect on what he is going to bring for his future, what he has presented for his future. And then Allah says, Wattaqullah again. Inna Allah khabirum bima ta'malun. Why does Allah repeat? So according to some Mufassirin, Allah repeats taqwa because on the one hand, we have taqwa and then we enter into Allah's religion and we begin to open ourselves to that religion and to the dictates of that religion. And then we begin to act and we orient our lives according to that religion, and then we have to have taqwa. Once we have acted, once we have done, and we have strived the best, most of the time it's not even the best that we can do, but whatever we have done, we strive to do it, and then we have taqwa and we fear Allah for all of those mistakes that we have done on this path. Wattaqullah. after having done all of these responsibilities and these requirements, we turn towards Allah. According to the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen in Dua Kumail, we call to Allah, Ya Sari al-Rida. O He who is quick to be satisfied with the meager and the little that I have done. اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء. Forgive the person who has nothing but dua and prayer towards you. O Allah, irham man ra'su malihi al-raja wa silahuhu al-buka. O Allah, I have tried and I have failed. I have tried to become good, but I know in the beginning I do dua, and then at the end I do dua, because this is all that I have. In the beginning, I cry towards Allah, and then at the end, I cry towards Allah, because this is really all that I have. I try to fulfill that potential that you have given me, but I fail. And this isn't just something on a personal level. Yes, each and every one of us has this. But even on a social and societal level, we said that virtue is me creating those beauties, those beautiful characteristics in my soul, and then trying to exude that beauty in my society. We see that time and time again. Muslims, and not just the Muslims, but even the followers and the close people to the Ahlul Bayt, they tried to bring about that goodness within that society, that virtue within their society. It said that after the events of Karbala began by talking about this event, that after the events of Karbala, the people of Medina and the people of Mecca rose up in revolt. They had heard about what had happened to Imam Hussein, and they rose up in revolt to fight against the oppression of Yazid. And it is said that throughout the history of the Banu Umayyah, there were revolt after revolt by the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt and as well by the general Muslim population. And their proclamation was Ar-Rida min Ali Muhammad. That person, that individual from the family of the Prophet who is going to come and bring back that virtue and that justice to our society. And each and every one of these revolts and revolutions was put down and it was destroyed. And yet, there was always this struggle. Until finally, one of those revolts and revolutions succeeded, and then it turned into the Banu Abbas. We try and we try to create this goodness within ourselves, and yet we fail. We try to fulfill our intellect, and yet we fail. We try to fulfill that goodness within our society, and yet we fail. So we look towards Allah to bring for us that hope, fulfill that hope He has given us. One of the functions of Islam is to not only present to us these virtues, allow us those means to reach that virtue, but as well to give us hope in the face of our meagerness, of our inability, to give us hope. That one day, our intellects will be fulfilled, will be completed. One day, we will truly see that goodness and that virtue in our society. One day, Allah will bring that true justice to our society. Whenever we do a dua, when we say, for example, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنًا وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنًا وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. What is the ultimate hasan, the hasana that we can have in this world? Whenever we do these du'as, that ultimate level of hasana that we can have in this world is by the reappearance of our final Imam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi. The ultimate fulfillment and completion of our intellect will come on that day. And so we have hope. We don't despair. The ultimate level of virtue and justice comes on that day, and so whichever moment in our lives we pray, the ultimate fulfillment of that prayer is that reappearance of the final Imam. And so we pray to Allah to bring about that reappearance, to hasten it. And we have this in the forefront of our minds and our souls. He mentioned the final Imam. Let us turn now towards Karbala. It is said that one of the du'as of our final Imam, the Imam, this Imam who has been promised to come and take vengeance on the blood and on that sacrifice of Imam Hussein, and to revenge his blood and his sacrifice. It is said that even that final Imam weeps for Imam Hussein. These difficult lines. The Imam says, As-salamu ala shayb al-khadib. My salutations, my salams on that beard that was dyed with his own blood. As-salamu ala al-khadd al-tarib. My salams on those cheeks that were laid on the ground. As-salamu ala al-thaqr al-maqru'i bil-qadib. My salams and my salutations on those teeth that were struck with the cane. As-salamu ala al-ra's al-marfu'. My salams on that head that was taken up high. When it was asked of Imam Sajjad, why, O Imam, after all of these years, one of the servants of Imam Sajjad, after many years had passed from the events of Karbala, they asked him, why is it that after all of these years, you still cry? It is said that Imam Zainul Abidin cried so much that whenever they would bring a glass of water, whenever they would bring some food for the Imam to eat, his tears would fall and they would mix with that water. And his tears would fall and they would mix with that food. And after all of these years, the servant of Imam Zainul Abidin asks the Imam, is it not enough? Have you not forgotten those memories? That tragedy, however difficult it may have been, yet they were many years ago. And the Imam Sajjad responds, how could I forget? When you look at Yaqub, he was a man who had 12 sons, and only one of those sons went away from him and disappeared from him. And yet Yaqub knew that this son is alive and one day he will meet him again. And yet Yaqub cried so much, and this difficulty was so difficult for him to bear that his back became bent and his hair turned gray, and he cried so much that he lost the sight in his eyes. And yet I saw with my own eyes and I heard with my own ears the cries of Imam Hussein. I saw how Imam Hussein was slaughtered in the plains of Karbala. How could I forget? How could I allow my hair to not turn gray and my sight to leave me? And yet it is asked of Imam Zainul Abidin, what was the most difficult moment? You saw your father being sacrificed on the desert plains. And yet, what was the most difficult moment in this journey? Imam Zainul Abidin responds, Ash-Sham, Ash-Sham, Ash-Sham. Damascus was that most difficult of moments. It is said that Imam Zainul Abidin describes those difficult moments. He says, when we were brought into the city of Sham, we were surrounded by the swords unsheathed, and their spears were turned towards us. They brought and they paraded the heads amongst our crowd, and we saw and this memory was renewed for each and every one of us whenever we would look at the heads of my father Imam Hussein and my uncle Abbas. And we were paraded around the streets, and we were brought into the slave quarters, and they would try to sell us as slaves, the haram and the household of the Prophet. And we were placed in a place which did not have any cover. Night and day, And we were taken to certain alleys where people would throw whatever stone and whatever rock and whatever fire they had in their arms, and they would come upon our bodies and they would burn our bodies and our clothes. These were the most difficult moments for Imam Zainul Abidin. The tragedy of Karbala did not end with Karbala. It continued wherever the caravan was taken. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. ماتم حسين.
کیا ڈھونڈ رہی ہے جنگل میں سکینہ کیا ڈھونڈ رہی ہے جنگل میں سکینہ عباس کے بازو یا بابا کا سینہ جنگل میں سکینہ کیا ڈھونڈ رہی ہے جنگل میں سکینہ کانوں سے چھنے گوہر اور آگ تھی دامن میں گھبرائی ہوئی بچی یہ کہتی رہی رن میں مجھ کو پہنچا دے مدینہ کیا ڈھونڈ رہی ہے جنگل میں سکینہ کیا ڈھونڈ رہی ہے جنگل میں سکینہ رن سے علی اصغر کو لے جنگل میں سکینہ کیا رہی ہے جنگل میں سکینہ ایک بار مجھے بابا اصغر سے ملا دو بھائی کا مجھے چہرہ ایک بار دکھا دو کہتی ہے سکینہ کیا رہی ہے جنگل میں سکینہ کیا ڈھونڈ رہی ہے میں سکینہ دنیا سے سدھارے ہیں بھائی جو میرے پیارے جب تک نہیں لوٹیں گے امو میرے دریا سے میں نے تو پھوپھی جان پانی نہیں پینا کیا ہے جنگل میں سکینہ کیا رہی ہے جنگل میں سکینہ جب سے یہ حسینہ ڈھونڈ رہی ہے جنگل میں سکینہ کیا ہے جنگل میں سکینہ پہنچے جو شہ والا بیٹے کی صدا سن کر دیکھا کہ رگڑتے ہیں ایڑی کو جوان اکبر نیزے کی انی ہے اور بیٹے کا سینہ کیا رہی ہے جنگل میں سکینہ کیا ہے جنگل میں سکینہ امت نے لیے جتنے سب زخم سہے دل پر احمد کا گھرانہ ہی لے آیا ہے ساحل پر جب بھی ہے گرا دین کا طوفان میں سفینہ کیا ڈھونڈ رہی ہے جنگل میں سکینہ کیا رہی ہے جنگل میں سکینہ ہوں گے یوں ہی محشر میں اونچے بستر اپنے برقد کا اجالوں سے بھر دیں گے ظفر اپنے رکھتے ہیں لحد میں اشکوں کا خزینہ کیا ڈھونڈ رہی ہے جنگل میں سکینہ کیا ڈھونڈ رہی ہے جنگل میں سکینہ یا حسین 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 اللہم صلی اللہ
اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام ولك السلام وإليك يعود السلام سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام على الأئمة الهادين المهديين السلام على جميع أنبياء الله ورسله وملائكته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين السلام على علي أمير المؤمنين السلام على فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين السلام على الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة أجمعين السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين السلام على 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين السلام على الحجة بن الحسن القائم المهدي عجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل الله مخرجه وجعلنا من أعوانه وأنصاره وشيعته والمستشهدين بين يديه السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته